Hello students, so welcome back to our third exercise, right? So we're still on the same guide, right? But like in this exercise, we'll be moving somewhat a bit fast, but not too fast, right? Okay, so now, right? So before we get started, right? So now in this exercise, like we'll be dealing with loops, right? Or making your code run indefinitely. And then one other thing that I also want to emphasize, or yeah, not emphasize, just like state out, right? So in the last exercise, we defined magazine one, right? So just to preserve time, I've also defined magazine two, which is P6, right? This P6, so this is magazine two. These are the coordinates for P6, right? So I'll just leave them for, let's say, you can pause the video so that you can record these coordinates for P6, right? So P6, if I can, it's, let me just double click to show you where, this is where P6 is, right? So I've defined this new coordinates, right? Because we'll be using them in this exercise, right? But anyway, moving on, right? So I hope you know what P6 is, right? So moving on from now, right? So we'll be doing exercise number 3, right? So like by now, like you should know what these lines mean, right? So okay, so yeah. So we're waiting for our part like here, and then we're opening the gripper to prepare like gripping the workpiece, right? So they're saying black workpieces need to be separated from the other workpieces for the purpose of further processing, right? So they're saying workpieces need to be stored separately into different magazine tubes, right? So magazine one, magazine two, right? And then they are saying, like, as a skilled employee, you are assigned the job of implementing this task with the aid of the new robot station, right? So here they're saying the operating sequence for the black and non-black workpieces by means, they're saying the black workpieces will be stored in the first magazine, right? So black workpieces will be black workpieces will be stored in the first magazine, which means they will be stored here, and then the other, let's say silver pieces, they'll be stored in the second magazine. Right. So yeah. So now let's get started, right? So first, again, you define your, this is where we'll be using this sensor now. So you'll see how we use it, right? So now here we're saying, like, we are telling our robot to wait for the workpiece and only break this loop after the workpiece has come, right? And then we're opening the gripper, right? And then before we move to our first position, we want to delay for 2 seconds, right? So this exercise, it's a combination of exercise number one and exercise number two, right? So now, like, you know that the first step that we have to do, right, is that we have to grab the workpiece from the first shoot, right? So we will write a code, right? So here we will say, like, comment, and then I'll say collecting the workpiece, right? So first, how I collect the workpiece, right? I'm gonna do an MVS move, right? So MVS to P1 at a height of -30, right? And then when I get there, right, to a height of minus, I move V, and then I move directly into P1, right? So I expect you guys to comment on the steps on what you do it, right? So after I do an MOV, so here, before here, you should add a delay for 2 seconds, right, before moving into P1, and then delay for 1 second, right? So for 2 seconds, right? So now since here, right, we've opened the gripper, right? So since now our robot, we've moved to here, right? So now we have to open the gripper. So we have to do H open one, right? So I expect you guys to comment on each and every line on what you are doing, right? So I'm just gonna fix this to be this, right? So now let me compile. So project successful. And then now if I play, s- sorry. So here, actually I was supposed to close my gripper so the robot can grasp the workpiece. So I have to, instead of H open, I have to H close, right? So that that as you can see now it's not gripping. So if I H close, it will grip. So I compile again. So after making modification in your code, you always compile, right? So now I've grasped the workpiece, right? So now, if you also still remember, so this is the slot where we test the workpiece at, right? So now after we've collected the workpiece, we move up again. So here, we are moving out. So let me just comment, moving out, from collecting the workpiece, right? So I'm just gonna do an MVS move at P1 to a height of -30, right? And then now, so now wait, before I move again, right, I have to delay, let's say by 1 second at this time, right? So you can change your delays, right? And then I compile. So project successful. So now after we have moved up to this position, if you still remember from exercise number 1, this is where we test the workpiece, right? So we move to assembly slot number 1, right? We have to test the composition of the workpiece, right? So now, if let's say here, right? So the same workpiece takes the robot from the chute, and then it advances to the picking position, right? And I think the workpiece, the robot grips the workpiece and then places it onto the assembly block storage, which means it places it into the assembly bulk or block here, which is here, right? And then it's gonna test the material, right? So if you still remember, when we were in the first video, right, the very first video, I indicated like how that sensor reacts to different materials, but I'll also do it again, right? So now we move to assembly slot number 1, right? So as I said, from here, right, we can't just do an MOV, like an MOV move, because it might cause collision since the robot takes the shortest path, so it might collide with the assembly bulk somewhere. So we have to maintain this height, right, while we move to the assembly bulk, right? So now we're gonna say moving to the assembly bulk, right, in slot 1, right? So we're going to slot 1, right? So before we move here, right, we'll delay for 2 seconds, right? And then we'll do an MVS move, right? So an MVS move to slot number 1. Slot number 1 is this one here, right? Which is our P2, right? So we'll do an MVS to P2 at a height of -30, right? And then now I can compile, right? and then so now you can see the MVS is the horizontal move. So now we are directly above slot number 1. So now we just have to delay for 1 second, right? And then we're gonna do a direct move, right? So a linear move, MOV into P2, right? So that we can drop the workpiece, right? So I expect you to comment here. So how you comment here is that like you semicolon and then you comment on whatever you are doing, right? And then you, yeah, so in every line, so I understand what you're trying to do, right? So now you do an MOV into P2, right? So now if I compile this, reset. So now so now you can see the workpiece is being grabbed and then it's moving to assembly bulk and then moving in, right? So now since our workpiece has moved in, right? So now we have to open the gripper. So we delay for 1 second, right? And then we open the gripper. So we H open 1, right? And then we delay for 2 seconds, right? So you can delay however you want, right? So now here, if you still remember, like from exercise number 1, we define this position, right? It's where the robot like drops the workpiece, right? But then the workpiece has to be tested, right? And then which for the workpiece to be tested, like the robot has to move to position number 3, right? Test the workpiece. So this is where the robot moves to this position here, right? Where it's gonna press or activate a particular sensor that's gonna test the material, right? So now we need to move the robot out to P3, right? So now after moving, so here, like after we have dropped the workpiece, right? So after the gripper is opened and then the workpiece is dropped, right? We have now to move move to test the material composition of the workpiece, material composition of the workpiece, right? So now first we have to move out it. So now since we've opened the gripper, right, and delayed for 2 seconds, we just do an MVS out of P2, right, to at a height of -30, right? And then we delay for 2 seconds, right? And then we we do an MVS, right, to position number 3, right? So we do an MVS to P3, right, at a height of -30, right? And then we delay for 2 seconds, right? So now if I can compile this, so now we have to do, for the sensor to be pressed, right, we have to do an MOV into P3, right? So and then delay for 2 seconds, right? And then now I can compile, right? So the robot will now from this position will move directly into P3, right? So now it's moving straight into P3, right, where it presses the sensor, right? So now here, like again, just to indicate, like, so now this sensor, like, so if the sensor, this is the sensor here, this sensor here, it's the one that's it's the one that's detecting the material composition of the workpiece, right? So now we have to use it like to what you call, we have to use it to help the thing make a decision, because here we are trying to, like, depending on the material composition of the product, right, of the workpiece, we're trying to determine if it goes to magazine 1 or magazine 2, as they said here. Here they said like the black, where is it? It said the black workpieces will go to, where is this thing? Yeah, they said the black workpieces will be stored in the first magazine, right? So like now, so now we have to help the robot make that decision, right? So now, like, so now if I can go to these sensors here, so this is the, I'm looking for that sensor, right? Which is, no, it's not the one, function text. Yes, so I'm gonna look for B1 underscore R, right, which is this one, right? So now, since, so now I'm just gonna reduce this. Also need this, and need this, right? So now, as you can see now, when there's a black workpiece, so this is the sensor that we're looking at, right? Since the, so now for this workpiece, right, it's detecting, like, it's turning on, right, which means it's detecting that, like, the, so it's detecting the workpiece as well. Like now if we can put in like the black workpiece, right, so we'll see how it responds, right? So now you can see it's not detecting anything, it's back to false, right? So now if I put the black workpiece, right, let's see if it's gonna turn on. So now I can see that, like, I can successfully conclude, and I'm sure you'd agree, that like when the black, like when the sensor detects a black piece, it doesn't trigger the sensor. But when it's a silver workpiece, the sensor gets triggered, right? So now we can say like if, right? So now we can come here, right? And then we can say if, so now, like, okay, so let me just do this, right? So here they're saying the black workpiece, like, will be stored in the first magazine, right? Which means, like, now we have to create a condition, right? An if condition, right? So now, right, how our if condition will work, right? So since like we know that the silver workpiece, since we know that like the silver workpiece triggers the, this triggers the sensor, right? So we'll create a condition here, right? So we'll say this is the condition for sorting the silver workpieces, right? And then we'll create another condition for sorting the black workpieces, right? So now, as I've previously explained, right, your B1 underscore R sensor, it's a digital, what you call, it's a digital sensor, which means it exists in two states, like of being on and off, right? So now here we'll say, right? So now we'll say here, right? We know that like if like the B21 B2R B21 underscore R sensor is equals to 1, right? Which means when it detects a workpiece, right? Then now this is the following steps. So we'll say like if the B21 underscore sensor becomes on, which means if it turns on, and you know that it only turns on when it detects the silver workpiece, then we want to write the sequence of steps that we want to take place, right? So which means since like now, since it's only going to turn on here when it detects a what you call when it detects a silver workpiece, right? So we'll move. So as the instruction said here, right, that the black workpieces move to the first magazine, right, which means they move to these magazines. We'll write a sequence of steps that will tell the robot to move to the second magazine, right? So which means from here, right? So wait, before we go back to the conditions, right? After testing has occurred, right, we have to grab the workpiece, right, before we make a decision on where it should go, right? So we'll take the workpiece from the from slot one, right? From slot one, right? Before you make a decision, you have to take the workpiece back first, right? So now here we'll just do an MVS to P3 at a height of minus 30, right? And then, so let me just remove this so it does, I'll put it back later here, right? So we'll do an MVS to P3 at minus 30, and then we'll delay for 2 seconds, right? And then we'll do an MVS back to P2 at a height of minus 30, and then we'll delay for 2 seconds, right? And then we'll move back to, now we'll do an MOV to P2, right? And then we'll delay for 2 seconds, right? And then now compile, and then so we're grabbing the workpiece again, right? So when we get here, obviously we have to close the gripper so we can grab the workpiece. So it's H close one, right? And then after we close the gripper, we delay for 2 seconds, and then we move back up to a height of minus 30 from P2. So we MVS P2 to a height of minus 30, right? And then compile, for to reset. So now we've grabbed the workpiece, right? And then now we can move back to our decision, right? So as I said, like if you still remember, or let me just repeat. So the B1 underscore R sensor, a digital, it's a digital, can I put this? It is a digital sensor, right? Which means it can either be on or off, right? So as I showed you, like on that thing that I just opened, like this one here, right? So your sensor, like it only turns on when it detects a silver workpiece, right? And when it detects a black workpiece, it doesn't turn on, right? So which means we'll say if, right, if the B1 underscore R sensor is equals to 1, right? Which means if it detects the silver workpiece, right? And then you wanna say you want to do an MOV to magazine 2, right? Since they said the black workpiece goes to magazine 1, which means the silver workpiece will go to magazine 2, right? Which means we'll do an MOV to P6, right? So we'll do an MOV to P6, right? So here we should add a delay. We should probably add a delay here, right? So we'll move to P6, right? And then when we get to P6, right? Obviously, you want to open the gripper, right? So we'll say H open one, right? And then so after we have opened the gripper, right? And then so these are the sequence of steps that we want the robot to follow, right? So which means now if and then like the other secondary condition, right? So like this, if like this happens, right? That's when like when the like which means if the sensor gets turned on, that's when we want the robot to move to P6 and then drop the workpiece, right? Or else, so here we write else, right? Else, right? This is what we want, right? So we say else, and then we say we want to do an MOV to the magazine one, right? Which is P5, right? So we want to do an MOV to P5, right? And then so here I should delay by 2 seconds, and then also delay by 2 seconds here, right? And then want to move to PO5, and then when you get to PO5 we delay by 2 seconds, and then we age open the gripper, right? So age open gripper one, right? So which means like if this condition, if what you call, so since your sensor, as I said again, so I'm gonna repeat this, is very important. So since your sensor, it exists into into positions that can either be on or off, 1 or 0, right? So if it's 1, which means if it's on, which means if when it's detecting the silver workpiece, it's gonna turn on, right? And then it's gonna execute these steps, right? Otherwise, else, which means if your sensor remains to be 0, it doesn't turn on, right? It will execute these steps like this here, right? So now I hope you get like the logic, right? And then after that we have to end the if condition. So you say end if, right? So end if, right? And then now we compile. So project was successful, right? And then we reset. So now we'll test the silver workpiece and we'll test the black workpiece. So since the silver workpiece, the robot is gonna execute this part of the code, right? And it's gonna skip the else part. So like since silver workpiece is gonna execute this part and then it's gonna skip this one because it doesn't apply to the robot. So wait, so it's moving to the wrong magazine. So let me try and troubleshoot what I did wrong. Let me try the black workpiece. So the black workpiece is going into the right chute, right? And then so like which means the prime is here, right? So let me just try and troubleshoot. So now, like, so what appears to be happening, right? If you still remember, like after we went to test the workpiece, right? So here, this part of the code, right? It needs to be part of the if statement, right? So let's say after the sensor is only activated when the part is here, when the gripper is here, right? Which means that like from when the sensor is triggered, right? We need to copy this. So we just select it and then you say Control C, right? And then you need to paste it here, right? And it should also be a part of this code. So Control V here, right? And then so now and then you remove this because you don't need it, right? So now this what it basically means, right? So this part is the part where the robot goes to grip the workpiece again, right? So like so now what's happening is that like the sensor only turns on when the workpiece it's there, right? So like we need the decision needs to start from when the testing is still occurring, right? So which means like now this and this they need to be part of the code, right? So now if we run this for so now like one thing I'm missing, right? So now like so the robot has to so here let's just comment here, let's say moving to magazine 2, right? For this is for the silver work piece, right? Magazine 2, right? And then here it's moving to magazine 1. So it's moving to so okay, I forgot to comment. So moving to magazine 2, magazine 1 here, right? For the this for the black work piece, right? And then now so now let's say like our robot detects a silver work piece, right? So here, before I go back there, right? So this is the start of our sequence, right? So which means I'll define this part. So I'm trying to now, let's say I'm trying to get the code to run continuous. I'm gonna loop the code. So I'm gonna define where the code starts, right? As my start position, right? So it's gonna be, this is gonna be my start position, right? So here, like this is where I'm gonna tell my code to go back to start executing again, right? So now let's say if it detects a workpiece, right? Like let's say it detects a silver workpiece, right? It's gonna execute this code, right? And then it's gonna execute this one, right? And then it's gonna move on to this start executing this one here, right? But if like if it detected a silver workpiece, right? First, we would want it like to go back to you want it to go back to if it detected a silver workpiece, we want it to go to magazine 2 and then so it mustn't execute this code and it must go back to start, right? So we'll say come here, right? And then we'll say if this code part of the code is executed, want to go to back to start, right? Want to go back to start, right? And then if this part of the code isn't executed, so this part is gonna, if like the center doesn't detect the workpiece, this part of the code is gonna get skipped and then your robot is gonna execute this part, right? So now I'm not just talking to the base, right? So now I reset, insert a silver workpiece. Oh, sorry, I forgot to compile. Uh, So now you can see the silver piece is moving to the second magazine and it's being dropped, right? So now let's try the black work piece, right? So now if we have the black work piece, so now the black work piece should move to magazine 1 because it's gonna, as you can see, it's executing the else part of the code because the sensor didn't turn on. So it's moving to magazine 1 and then dropping the workpiece, right? So after it drops the workpiece, right, want now we end the if condition here, right? And then after we end the if condition, right, we want the robot to go back to its home position to await the next cycle, right? So we're gonna say moving back to the home position, right? Which means we'll say do an MOV to our home position, which is P100. Right? So we'll do an MOV to P100, right? And then now we end our code, right? So yeah, there's already end on our code, right? But then like to ensure that our code runs on a continuous loop, right? Want to make sure after it goes back to home, right? It doesn't stop. So now if you look at this, right? So if I can just insert a workpiece, right? So I want you to pay attention to the play here and the code. So now it's currently running one work cycle, right? So okay, so wait here, it's not gonna. So for a silver piece, it's not gonna run one work cycle. For a black piece, it's gonna run it's gonna run one work cycle, right? So for here, so okay, I forgot to compile. But okay, for the silver work pieces, like it's continuous, right? But then, like let's say we're doing it for the black work piece, right? So you'll see for a black work piece, like it will only run one work cycle, right? So we have to loop it like for both, right? So for the silver work piece, right? We said after it executes these instructions, right? It's gonna go back to start, right? Which means it's gonna go back to here at the top and it starts gonna executing from here, right? So now we have to loop it like our for our black work piece, right? So after it going to home, we're gonna tell it so it's running one and then it stops. So you don't want it to go to end. Instead, we want it to loop the code again, right? For to prepare for another work piece. So it's gonna say come here, right? And we're gonna say go to and then percentage sign start, right? No, it's not. This is an asterisk. So now our code, if now I compile, it's gonna run continuous. So I insert a silver workpiece. So now you can see for the silver workpiece, it's currently not going home, right? So which means you need to go back to where the condition is for the silver workpiece. So before it goes back to start again, right? We want to loop the code. So will it's already looped here, right? So after it drops the workpiece, right? Want it to go to move back to P100, right? Before it can go back to start, before it can go back to the top, right? And then I compile, right? And then I run again, right? So I reset and then insert the silver workpiece. So now it drops the workpiece and then it's gonna move back to home before it loops the code, right? As you can see now it's starting sequence. I don't have to now reset and do everything. I just insert the next workpiece. So now it goes back to home, right? So let's say now I were to, as you can see, it's not stopping, but instead it's preparing the loop again, right? So let's say now I were to just insert a black workpiece, right? So it should go to the first magazine. So yeah, so now you can see like that our system is able to perform its iterated function. So it's sorting out the different workpieces and it's running continuously, right? So as you can see, the black workpieces are being put onto the first magazine, and then the silver workpieces are being put onto the second magazine, right? So and our code is continuous. It's on a loop now, right? So yeah, this is our exercise number 3. So if you have any more questions or you want to see the real robot in action, you can come by at the lab, right? And if you also have any questions, you can come and consult, right? So yeah, thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and like. Shout out.